Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and welcome to this episode of the Phil Cooke Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about my book, Ideas on a Deadline, How to Be Creative When the Clock is Ticking. I've pulled 10 principles. It's kind of an overview of the book, and I pulled 10 key principles that I think will start to help you unlock these principles in your own lifetime. If you read the book, this is going to really help support that, and if you haven't read the book, you need to order it right away. You can get it at ideasonadeadline.com, or you can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your favorite local bookstore. But get it, because if you really want to understand how to break the cycle of having to fail, if you want to break the cycle of missing deadlines, you need to break that myth that you have to wait for a eureka moment. There are ways, proven ways, that you can be creative when you need it the most. Stay tuned. Today's episode could change your creative future. Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and I'm really excited about what I'm teaching today, which is based on my book, Ideas on a Deadline, How to Be Creative When the Clock is Ticking. I wrote this because I've lived my whole career under the clock. I mean, I work in television, I've worked in advertising, I've worked in places where I have to publish books on by a certain deadline, and deadlines have always been a part of what I do. And yet, over and over and over, I meet creative people who just can't quite make a deadline. Either they don't respect it, they don't value it, and they certainly can't deliver the project on that deadline, which sometimes can cost thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars, if the project doesn't get made. So I want to talk a little bit today about 10 principles I've discovered, and the research indicates I've gone into a much deeper examination of it in my book, Ideas on a Deadline, but I want to pull some of the key principles out of the book, talk to you today about how to really jack up your creativity for all practical purposes. Give it a shot in the arm. You know, it's so funny. A novelist, Jack London, said, "You can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club." I love that quote. And also artist Chuck Close said, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work." You know, we live under a myth out there that if we're going to be super creative, we have to wait for that fire to fall from heaven. We have to wait for this eureka moment to happen. But the truth is, whatever you do, you may be a designer, a filmmaker, a writer, a producer, or you may not be in a professional creative capacity. You may be a real estate person. You may be a coach, a teacher, a business executive. Whatever, you need to deliver ideas and projects and products on a deadline. And we need to be able to call up those breakthrough ideas when we need them the most. So I want to take just a few minutes and talk about 10 keys that I think are really, really important in helping that happen. Number one, make the decision that deadlines matter. They can be fuel to your creative process. We just have to take a responsibility and understand how important deadlines can be and make a commitment to stick to them. The fact is, when you can't make deadlines, you've lost the respect of your boss, you've let down your coworkers, you've let down the client. You're not going to get a lot of respect from a client who sees you as someone who can't deliver when he or she needs it the most. So start by just making a decision in your own professional life that deadlines matter. I'm going to do it and I'm going to keep them. It says an enormous amount about your professionalism if you become known as a person who can always bring the project in on time and on budget. Make a huge difference for you. The second thing is get organized. Get organized. Now, you know, I could do a whole episode on this, but the truth is many creative people, and some of you, listening to me right now, have desks that look like a nightmare. And a lot of you will defend it by saying, you know what, I'm just creative. This is the way I'm organized. But the fact is, over and over, I see creative people struggle to find that newspaper clipping they need, struggle to find that note they wrote a couple weeks ago, struggle to find that book they need to reference because they're just so incredibly unorganized. So one of the best things you could do is start developing a system for capturing ideas, processing them, putting them down in such a way that you have access to them when you need them the most. Now, I'm not a genius in that way. I struggle with that myself. Now, there are guys like John Maxwell, the leadership expert. He's got file system after file system after file system. He can go back and find an idea or a thought he had 10, 15 or more years ago that he needs to put into a new book. And it's just incredibly organized. I'm blown away by just how organized John is. However, I'm not at that level, but I do make an effort. The way I write ideas down, the way I put them into my phone, into my computer, catalog them, organize them, at least I make an effort. So getting organized is a real key to, being a professional. And the truth is, If you haven't discovered it yet, you'll find out that creative ideas are the most fragile things in the world. If you don't write them down, if you can't capture them in some capacity, you will fail. And because you're going to forget them. You are absolutely going to forget them. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I had a brilliant idea and thought, yeah, sure, I'll remember that. And you never do. So learn to set up a system, get organized for keeping your ideas, because when those things happen, you need to capture those ideas. Number 3. Learn to say no. One of the great reasons creative people don't come up with better ideas, particularly on a regular basis, is they don't create the margin for reflective, creative time by saying no to certain things and certain people. The fact is, you don't have to be a jerk about it, but I can tell you that us creatives, we're nice people. We want to help. We want to, get that coffee for somebody when we're down the hall, or we want to get that file for somebody, or we want to help them with this project. I was getting ready for this teaching right now, and I got a call from somebody that's getting ready to make a film and had a contract question he wanted to run by me. I had to say no. I'll call you later this afternoon. You just have to start learning to say no. You can do it in a nice way, but here's the thing. If you don't value your creative time, your boss won't, your client won't, your coworkers won't, you have to decide that I'm going to create margins for creativity in my schedule and my life by saying no to certain projects. It's just incredibly important that you value your own skill, your own creativity by learning to say no. Number 4, start with clarity. I'll tell you, the number of creative projects I've seen people miss the mark on or fail at are largely because they didn't seek clarity at the beginning. We creative people, our mind shoots ahead. As soon as the boss or as soon as a client starts sharing an idea, we start assuming, jumping ahead, thinking what could happen, and we don't start with clarity to figure out exactly what he or she is thinking about. That is so incredibly important. And very often, I understand, it's a little bit awkward maybe or scary to ask questions in the meeting, but I'll tell you, asking questions then is so much less embarrassing than failing on delivery down the road. So clarity, I cannot stress it enough. I know in my own case, I have done projects where I just assumed too much. I just assumed I knew what the client was thinking, and I wasn't as clear as I should have been. I should have asked more questions. I should have taken more time at the top, made sure before I go into that project or do that creative effort, I know exactly what it's about and what the client's looking for. Always start by being as clear as possible about everything. So start with clarity. Number 5. And now we're getting into some really interesting stuff that I'm fascinated by. I believe in the power of creative extensions. And I want to talk a little bit about number 5, what I consider creative extensions. We live in a world, if you've heard me speak before, I've talked about the fact that research indicates the typical person sees about 10,000 media messages every day. We touch our iPhone hundreds of times a day. We're constantly getting barraged with notifications, with emails, with text messages. We just live in this distracted culture. And research is indicating now that we're taxing out our brain's ability to come up with stuff. We've grown up. Most of you who are listening or watching this, most of us have grown up thinking we're only using 10% of our brain. You remember that idea? We're only using a small percentage of our true brain power. Well, guess what? That's not true. That's not true. Neurologists are telling us today that when they do, scans of a brain, particularly when someone's creating or thinking or processing, it's all firing. It's all firing. We're using far more of our brain than we ever thought. And so I think it's important that we understand that we shouldn't just rely on our brain to come up with the idea. How many times do people just sit at their desk, bang their head against a wall, thinking, I can think this through, I can figure this out. The truth is, there are other things that can really help kickstart that process, and I call them creative extensions. For instance, research indicates a personally designed workspace is going to result in far more creativity than a workspace that someone else designed. How many creative people work in a cubicle or an office that somebody else created and somebody else designed, and they haven't taken the time to customize it and make it their own? Let me tell you, one of the first things you need to do as a creative person is whatever your workspace is, whether it's a cubicle or an office or a shared space, make it your own. Personalize it. Research actually indicates that the more you personalize it, the more creative you can be. I worked with an organization, a big nonprofit years ago, And I talked the CEO into letting the creative team rip out the carpet, get rid of the cubicles, kind of refashion that whole creative space individually as their own. And I'll tell you, the creativity, the productivity just blew up. It was amazing the difference it made. Another thing is the power of sense or smell. Remember, you know how you smell something and it reminds you of your high school prom, or it reminds you of your wedding, or it reminds you of some experience you did years ago. Research more and more indicates that smell can be such a powerful tool in unlocking our creativity. So get that candle in there if you need to. Get the incense burning. As long as it doesn't bother other people, think about how smells could enhance your thinking, enhance your reflection, your productivity. It can make a really big difference. Another study says micro breaks, just incredibly short breaks, can make a dramatic difference when it comes to your creativity. For instance, one study indicates that when you take a break and look out over a field or grass, a garden, even trees, it is so much better for you than if you look out over a brick wall or look into another office building. It's just amazing the difference a little tiny short break can do for your creativity. So what we call micro breaks, super tiny short breaks, matter a lot. So think about how that can help extend your creativity and your brain power. Another thing is, who are you working with? We often forget that we can work with people who inspire us, or we can work with people who are giant black sucking holes. They just pull you in and they just suck the life out of you. We need to think about that. The people around us can make a dramatic difference in our creativity. So start thinking about spending more time with creative people. I was with a guy the other day. He wanted to ask me a question about a TV commercial project he was working on. And it was just his personality. He wasn't angry or anything, but he just would get right in my face. He felt comfortable like 6 inches from my nose. And he just would not back off. And I kept stepping back. He'd step up. I'd step back. He'd step up. He just was right in my face. And he was loud, not angry. He was not mad about anything, but that was just his personality. And after 30 minutes of talking to that guy, I was physically exhausted. I mean, he just wore me out. And I thought, if I had to work with that dude, I couldn't produce anything. I would be worthless. So just remember, who are you talking to? Who are you working with? Who are you being inspired by? Find those people out. Okay, so now let's get to some really fun statistical stuff, or some specific stuff that I think is really important. Number 6, for the best ideas, go to the source. Find out the people that idea will impact. Get their input. Now, we've seen marketing surveys, for years and years and years. That's nothing new. Focus groups. Our team at Cooke Media Group is working with a big TV station right now in the Northeast, and we've been doing focus groups with their viewers, their leadership team, their creative staff, just to look at the programming they're producing, what people like, what they dislike, how they might change their positioning in the marketplace. And I'm amazed at what we're getting from people who are out there who have been watching, listening to this TV station for all these years. Find the people find the people that your work will impact the most and get their opinion. Great example is when I was 36 years old back in 1991. I got fired from my job in the Midwest. My wife Kathleen and our 2 daughters and I decided to bundle up and come to California. We moved to LA in 1991. And we stopped in Vegas because her parents lived there, and we were going to live with them for a month or 2 while we looked for a house in Los Angeles. And so while we were there, a friend of ours who was actually the maid of honor at our wedding, her husband was a highly regarded graphic designer in Las Vegas, and he introduced me to the marketing director at the Circus Hotel. She was the marketing director. It was a chain of hotels, the Circus, Excalibur, the Sahara. Even her boss that owned everything owned a boat racing team. And so I talked to her, and she hired me to be a freelance writer to help them with a lot of their promotional marketing advertising stuff. And so it was really fun. I was doing casino stuff. I was doing items on a menu at different restaurants. I was even writing promotional material for their racing boat team. But this was back when Vegas decided they wanted to become more family friendly. So they were launching, the Circus Hotel decided to launch what they called the Adventure Dome, which was the largest inside amusement park in the world. And so she came to me and said, hey, we got to name these rides. We got to come up with names for the rides. So I thought about it. After a couple days, I was thinking about it. And by this time, we had moved on to California. We were living in California. I was still working with the hotels. And I was thinking, okay, what could we do? I was in my mid-30s at the time. I wasn't really a big amusement park person. And so I decided this is designed for young kids. So I decided to go to my daughter Kelsey's 2nd grade class. And I got permission from the teacher, went over one afternoon here in LA, sat down with the kids. And so I started going down the list of these rides. I said, okay, I've got a roller coaster that's going through canyons, it's going through desert mountains. Some kid yelled, Canyon Blaster. Check, got it. Did another one that said, this one takes you up and down, bounces you around all over the place. Kelsey and some girl yelled out, I think it was Roadrunner. And I just kept going down the list, and these kids got so excited. They were bouncing off names and coming up with great stuff, and took it back, polished it just a little, didn't make very many changes at all. And the next week, I took it to Las Vegas, pitched it to the team at Circus Circus, and guess what? They did not change a single name. And now, 20-some years later, we took our grandkids over there recently, and guess what? The rides are still there, and they're still called the same thing, which is a lifetime in the amusement park world. But I went to the source. I knew this was an amusement park for kids. So I went to the source, got two, second graders involved, and they got super excited. They came up with brilliant ideas. And by the way, if you ever go to Circus Circus, please don't tell them that my daughter, Kelsey's second grade class named all the rides. I took full credit for it, as you should. But they loved it. It worked out really great. And it's a great example of going to the source. I tell leaders, if you're having a meeting, get out of the conference room, go to where the problem lies. If the problem is in the parking lot, have the meeting there. If the parking lot is at a construction site, have the meeting there. If the parking lot is someplace else, have the meeting there. I did a project years ago for Phillips Petroleum, early in my career, where they called me because a refinery had blown up and killed a number of people. They wanted to rebuild the refinery, but they needed to do it by the book, and they wanted to tell that story really well. And so they brought me in to produce a documentary film about the rebuilding of that refinery. And I was really coming up with nothing. And I finally called him and said, look, I need to go to the site where the explosion was. And I went down and walked through the rubble, spent some time seeing the devastation firsthand. And I'll tell you, I couldn't even get back to my hotel room before ideas started popping in my head. So for creative ideas, always think, whenever possible, go to the source. Number 7, understand the power of a good walk. Now, I go into this a lot more detail because this is an important thing in my book. But let me tell you about walking. I tried to shoot baskets. I put up a basketball goal in my driveway, and I thought when I would hit a wall creatively, I'd go out there and start shooting baskets. But I noticed that I started focusing on my shot, and I wasn't coming up with creative ideas. And then I put a heavy bag in my garage, and I would go in there and box, for an hour. And I noticed I was focusing on my punching, and I wasn't coming up with creative ideas. And that's when I really discovered the power of walking. The cool thing about walking is you're not focusing. You're not thinking about anything specific. You're letting your mind wander. And it's in that process that your subconscious starts making connections. Now, let me say this. Research, and certainly my experience, indicates that walking in kind of an outdoor country setting is so much better. Seeing trees, there is some research that indicates the soft look of grass, bushes, trees, the countryside is much better for this. I go to New York or London, or I'm getting ready to go to Rome to work on a project in a couple weeks. And I'll walk there, but it's a new environment for me. When I'm walking in a city and when I'm walking in New York or London or someplace, I start noticing things. I look in store windows and I start looking at architecture and monuments and just all kinds. I start noticing people on the street. That doesn't help. You need to be at a place where you're not focusing on something. So perhaps you live in a city and that's no big deal to you, and you can walk without focusing on anything in particular, fine. But for me, I live a block from the Verdugo Mountains here in Los Angeles, and it's so nice for me to go up there and walk through mountain trails, and it makes a huge difference for me. But keep in mind, walking is a powerful, powerful tool. In the book, I list tons of great artists, thinkers, philosophers, theologians, politicians that walking was pivotal to what they did. Soren Kierkegaard, the theologian, would get up in the morning, he would write till about noon, he would have lunch, and then he'd spend the afternoon having a walk. And that really made things clear to him. And so think about how going out and walking around the block, walking out in the woods, just going out to a park can make a difference for you and just shake loose some of the thinking and the ideas that you've been holding back. Speaking of holding back, number 8 is hold back the flood. Now, I'm convinced that most creative people fail because they start a project too early. You've heard of writer's block, and a lot of writers get serious writer's block where they come up with nothing. And I think a lot of that happens because they start writing too soon. So whatever you're doing, you may be a designer, a filmmaker, whatever. Let me give you a secret. I hold back as long as I can. I'll go for those walks. I'll think about it. I'll ponder it. I'll reflect it. I'll research. I'll go on site if I need to. But let it tumble around in my brain for a while. Let me reflect on it. Let me think about it. And that, I start getting that urge to write, I fight it as long as I can. It's funny that I talked to I've worked with a number of advertising copywriters at high level agencies over the years. And over they tell me, I don't even start the project till somebody starts screaming for the copy I need to be writing. And the deadline is right there at my door. That's when I start. And I'm kind of the same way. I generally don't start a project until I see the deadline looming in the distance. I've talked to pilots who said, I'll tell you, when you see that runway coming up on you, that's when the blood starts pumping and things start flowing. So that's a really important thing to think about. So hold back. Don't start the project too soon. Let it move around. Let it develop. Let it brew in there. And suddenly, when you can't help it, when you have to write, it's coming out. That's when I sit down and boy, I'll tell you, the ideas start flowing. So hold off as long as you can. Last two things I think are important. Number 9 is, what role do dreams play? Well, let's talk about dreams for just a minute, because there's a lot of myths and ideas floating around about dreams and whether they help our creativity or not. In ancient books like the Bible, dreams are used frequently to reveal things to people. And throughout history, people have experimented with dreams and wondered about, do they work? Let me tell you what I found out. And by the way, there's a lot of conjecture today. We don't have answers, but we have conjecture that some scientists think that dreaming is like our brain defragging like a computer does during a night, kind of cleaning up and reorganizing. Others think it's your neurons, sparking off ideas and trying to connect scenes to make sense of what you experienced during the day, which I kind of gravitate toward that idea. What I've discovered about dreams is I never have a full answer revealed to me in a dream. I don't get the solution to my problem, my creative problem, it just doesn't deliver in a dream. What happens to me more often is connections are made. I'll wake up and see something like I've never seen it before. Or I'll think of something that I had never thought about before. And this is why it's important for you to keep a notepad and a pen next to your bed. First of all, let's go back to the ideas being fragile. How many times do you wake up in the middle of the night with a brilliant idea that'll save the world, only to find out the next morning you've completely forgotten about it? So I have a pen next to my bed, and I'll tell you, there's a pen I'd recommend. I don't have it with me here, but it's called a pilot's pen. You can go on Amazon or other places and find it. It's called a pilot's pen, and it has a little light at the end. So I don't have to turn on a light. I can just grab my little pilot's pen, flick it open, and a little light comes up that just illuminates the area on the pad where I'm writing. And I find that if I don't do that, I'll write something in the middle of the night, and the next morning it's gibberish, and I don't understand a word of it. But little things like that can make a difference. So start writing it down. I would also recommend that before you go to bed, now I go into much more detail about this in my Ideas on a Deadline book, and I think it would be important for you to think about. Before you go to bed, just think for a second about the challenge you're facing. Don't ruminate on it, because you won't be able to sleep. You'll just, think about it and think about it and think about it all night long. But at least just recall the challenge you're facing and think to yourself, I'm going to remember my dream, and I'm going to remember this in the morning. And now, here's the thing. For those of you who don't remember dreams, this has been going on with you for years. Now, let me say you are dreaming, by the way. Research indicates everybody dreams. Some of it, unless you have a neurological problem, but if you're healthy, you dream. Most of us don't remember the dream. So if that's been going on for years, it may take a while for you to get back in the rhythm of remembering your dreams. But go to bed, think a little bit about the problem. Again, don't dwell on it or ruminate on it, but just think about the problem and just say to yourself, I'm going to remember this dream when I wake up. And it's not weird, it's not new agey, but it really does start training your brain to help you remember and have that pen and pencil ready. And by the way, don't get up too soon in the morning. Sit there, just lay in bed for a second thinking about what you could have been dreaming about that night before, and suddenly those ideas will happen. And by the way, a lot of this happens, a lot of your best dreams will happen in the moment you're falling asleep and the moment you're starting to wake up. A lot of research has been done. Artists like Salvador Dali, inventors like Thomas Edison have discovered the power of naps. They would actually hold ball bearings in their hand over a metal plate, and they would sit in a chair and nod off, and when they fell asleep, they would drop the ball bearings, of course, and it would hit the plate, wake them up, and they would try to remember what they were dreaming about at that moment. So naps can help. But think about how you could use dreams. And like I say, I go to it in much more detail in the book, but dreams can be a tool for making connections. In my experience, I wouldn't expect to hear the whole solution or have something revealed from heaven. It could happen. I'm not against it, but for me, it's more about those connections being made in my subconscious that I wouldn't have thought of during the day. The last thing I would say, number 10, is what I call the holy trinity of creativity. Find the place, schedule a time, and show up. Now, granted, over the years in my creative life, I've written on a freighter going up the Amazon River in sweltering heat. I've written during a military coup while I was filming in Africa. I've written sitting outside a pyramid in amazing desert heat in Egypt. But the place I like to write the most is my home office. And the truth is, as a creative person, we should be able to produce anywhere, but you need to have a place where you have your tools. In my home office, I have my library, I've got my big computer screen, I've got the files that I need, I've got the books I need to access, references. That's where I like to work. And so find that place that works for you. If you're constantly going from Starbucks to a friend's house to a restaurant or whatever, unless that's a regular schedule that you're doing and it's really working for you, think about finding a home base where you have your stuff nearby that you can really focus. Because I know in my home office, when I sit down in my chair, my brain says it's time to create. It's time to think. Your body gets into that rhythm. Speaking of rhythm, circadian rhythm is important. It's real. We have times of day that we're up and down, that we can focus better, that we relax more. For me, 6 a.m. to noon, I can write, I can create, I can focus. That is my time. Afternoons, not so much. Nighttime, forget it. Nighttime is for movies. Nighttime is for watching TV or reading. But for focused creative time, I need to do that from 6 a.m. to noon in the morning. Find that time for you and show up there every day. And the last point is actually show up every day. We have to be in a rhythm. If you talk to really high-level creative writers that do amazing work, you'll find out they write every day no matter what. No matter what. They'll do it on Christmas morning. They'll get up and put in their hours before they start to celebrate Christmas. So these kind of things are really important. Find the place that works for you. Find the time of day that works best for you. Now, let me say, sometimes if you're working a full-time job and you want to work on a book or a script or something else, I understand you can't block off from 6 a.m. to noon. However, when I was working full-time in my 20s and my early 30s, I came into work. I discovered I was a morning person, so I came to work 2 hours early. I would come in at 6. People didn't show up till 8. And I wrote my first 2 books in those 2-hour blocks every morning before everybody came in and phone calls started and people started interrupting me, because I knew that was my creative time. So you can adjust. If you're willing to move it around, you can really amp up your creativity. So here's the bottom line. You need to stop believing the myth that you need to wait for that eureka moment. You need to wait for fire falling from heaven with the creative gods. You need to understand that true professionals get to work and start doing the kind of things that I'm outlining here that will get their brain ready to be creative. You can be creative on demand. I live and work in Hollywood. I know too many writers that they're tasked with being a showrunner for a Netflix or an Amazon series. They know 6 months to a year before they have to deliver that series. So they know they've got to come up with ideas. They've got to write the episodes. They've got to produce the shows. Real professionals understand it. And the higher you go in the creative world, the more those deadlines will matter. You can go to ideasonadeadline.com if you'd like to order the book there. You can donate to our nonprofit, The Influence Lab, which helps teach media training to people internationally, third world countries. It's just a great effort to help them use the media more effectively to tell their story. Also, it supports our work in Hollywood. My wife, Kathleen, has Influence Women, which is regular meetings with women who are high-level professionals here in Hollywood to mentor, to inspire them. We're also launching chapters in Atlanta and Nashville. It's growing like crazy. And your donation there, if you want to order my book and make a little donation there to the Influence Lab, it would really help make a big difference for the work we're doing. Otherwise, you could go to Amazon, you could go to Barnes & Noble, get it at your local bookstore. The important thing is get it. Get it. It will make a dramatic difference for you.